Hey gang, and welcome to your final video, your final homework video of World History 2. I know you guys are really excited to get on with this and just to get it over with. So let's dive right in and let's start talking. So this unit has been all about where the world is today and how the world functions today and the differences between developed and developing countries and how globalization and economic interdependence has impacted the country. Well, one of the things that we've talked about is how the world has, that sometimes there are big differences between the people that have stuff and those that don't. Sometimes developing countries are very poor and developed countries are very, very rich. And even within countries, there's a big difference between the really wealthy people and those without so much wealth. So one of the responses to those unequal conditions around the world and even within countries is the use of terrorist activities. Now, typically when we think of terrorism, we think of religious extremists. In here in America, to be quite honest, we typically associate that with the Islamic religion. That is not the case. Now, these differences can occur for all sorts of reasons, and people use terrorism for all sorts of causes. So what is terrorism? First of all, let's get a definition. It's the use of violence and threats to intimidate and coerce people to do what you want for political reasons. This can be anything from Palestinians wanting Israelis to get out of their land to grant them statehood. It is anywhere from people, conservative Christians who don't believe in abortion, bombing an abortion center or shooting people trying to go into an abortion center. It can occur for a wide variety of reasons. The common strain that I gave you right then was this. One of the major causes, not the only, but one of the major causes of terrorism is religious extremism. People who are very devoted to their religion and they believe that their way is the right way and the only way. They believe that the way to get their point across and the way to solve many problems is through terroristic activities and the use of violence. And obviously that's wrong and obviously dangerous, but that is that belief. So where does it happen? This is a really great map because typically what makes the news the most for us are events that happen in Europe and in the United States because it is so different from our world and our understanding. It's very newsworthy. Well, the red on the chart here, down here, you see that those are areas with high levels of terrorist activity. What you'll find is that most terrorist activity occurs in Central America, in the Middle East, and we see here in Afghanistan and Pakistan, Sri Lanka, which we've talked about, the Philippines, and here in Central Africa. America and Europe, by standards over the last 45 years, really have not had much terrorism. You do see a little bit right here in Ireland, and that is because of the differences between the Protestants and the Catholics, and we've talked about that conflict already. So what are some examples of terrorism? Well, one example is, and this is religious extremism, is the Munich Olympics in 1972. Palestinian terrorists took Israeli Olympic athletes hostage and killed them at the Summer Olympic Games. They held them hostage because Palestinians, again, we've talked about this conflict repeatedly, wanted to be recognized as statehood and wanted their own nation. Another example that's obvious for us as Americans is the terrorist attacks on 9/11 by the Al-Qaeda terrorist organization led by Osama bin Laden, in which they flew two planes into the World Trade Center towers that did exist. They no longer exist. In 2011, they also bombed the U.S. Pentagon. They flew a plane into the U.S. Pentagon. And there was another plane that went down in Pennsylvania. There are also examples of car bombings. Now, car bombings are very common in Northern Ireland. They're often in that conflict. They're often used in conflicts in the Middle East or terrorist activities in the Middle East. But we had one here in the United States in Oklahoma City on April 19th, 1995. A man named Timothy McVeigh bombed the government building in Oklahoma City. He loaded a UPS, not a UPS truck, but a Ryder truck, a big box truck with explosive material, and and exploded it in front of that building. Suicide bombers, people who walk into crowds and blow themselves up and everyone around them. We have heard about that before. Airline hijackers. The 9/11 attackers were examples of people who hijacked airplanes. But also airplanes have been bombed. Pan Am Flight 103 was a flight from Frankfurt, Germany to Detroit, Michigan, and it blew up over Lockerbie, Scotland on December 21st, 1988. That was an example of state-sponsored terrorism. The Libyan government at the time, under their leadership of Muammar Gaddafi, who really hated the United States, authorized that bombing. Roadside bombs are common. A couple of years ago, Boston, the Boston Marathon, there were people who attacked the runners at the Boston Marathon by creating bombs and putting them next to trash cans and exploding them. Those are very common, the most common type of bomb used in the Middle East and many terrorist activities there. So how do Western governments respond to heightened terrorist activities? Well, one is increased surveillance. Governments create various programs to watch what people do. They put people on a watch list based on things they buy or on the way that they're some suspicious activity. And all of this surveillance raises privacy right concerns. We're not guaranteed in our United States Constitution a right to privacy. And many people feel that it's okay to lose a certain amount of privacy if it will make us safer. Many people feel that their phone calls, they don't mind their phone calls being tapped or wired into by the government, monitored by the government, if it will make them safer. Security at airports and ports where goods are shipped into the country have greatly increased since 9/11. Prior to 9/11, airport security was pretty strict, but you could travel much more freely and easily. After 9/11, it becomes much more strict. Everyone must go through a metal detector and take your shoes off and take your belt off. And you are liable to be searched at any time going to the airport now. And also, in many countries, people are asked to wear identification badges and make sure they have photo identification at all times to make sure, that they are who they are, say they are, and where they are supposed to be. So today's video was about terrorism, just a real brief overview of what it was, where it occurs, some specific examples of it, and how governments respond to it. So I hope you guys have enjoyed these videos, or at the very least learned a little bit from these videos that we have watched in world history, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow in class.